Hi everyone, my name's Charlotte.
Hi.
I work for the Scottish Women's Institutes, and on behalf of the Scottish Women's Institutes, I'd like to welcome you all to our online talk about ADHD in women. So we're delighted that so many of you have joined us today, and we've quite a mix of members and non-members on here. So for those of you who don't know who we are, I'll give a very brief explanation. So the SWI is a charitable and a member-led organisation, and we have roughly 10,000 members throughout Scotland. Our mission is to provide opportunities that bring women together where they can share their knowledge and learn and have fun and form friendships. And we're also 100% committed to covering all aspects of women's health and well-being. So we're delighted to have paired up with the Perth and Kinross ADHD support group tonight to explore ADHD and with a specific note on how it affects women. So our first speaker tonight is Lorna Redford, who works with families experiencing life with ADHD. And Lorna will then pass over to Demi and then Nikki, who both have lived experience of ADHD and have both been diagnosed at different stages of their lives. So our joint aim together is that in speaking about these conditions, we can spread awareness and remove some of the stigmas that can be associated with ADHD. So I'll pass over to Lorna now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to do my technical bit, so excuse me. Share. Oh, it's worked.
Yeah, brilliant.
I can relax now. Okay, so slideshow. Right, okay. Well, first of all, I'm Lorna Redford, and I'm the Group Services Coordinator for and founding member of the Perth and Kinross ADHD Support Group. So it's 20 years plus of experience in supporting those with ADHD. When we started, I was very keen for us to be, to be a resource, not just like knee squeezing, not that that's not, important as well, but I wanted us to be a resource. So we're very much enablers. So our mission was to support, nurture, educate and enable those with ADHD and their families and to live with the daily challenges and of ADHD and indeed its coexisting conditions. So I want to thank Charlotte, because sorry, Pauline, but it was Charlotte that invited me.
Oh, that's fine.
And Nikki and Demi there to join you this evening and to talk about women in ADHD. So I hope that I've covered points that you're interested in, and I'm delighted as always to take questions. Okay, so I think what we need to do, well, for me, in the way that my brain works, I like to get things kind of in context, okay? So globally, it's estimated that between 5 and 10% of the population would actually test positive or meet the diagnostic criteria for ADHD. So that's quite a large percentage of the population. But what is ADHD? And I think it's still out there, and we're discovering more about it all the time. But what it actually is a pervasive, challenging, and usually lifelong neurodevelopmental disorder. It can be called a condition or a disorder, and it has been recognised in some form since at least ancient Greek times. We're a bit geeky when it comes to stuff like that. So on our website, we've got a whole lot about the history of ADHD. It can have a significant positive and indeed negative impact on society. It requires support from an early age and potentially through a lifetime, and it is associated with dozens of other conditions and disorder. And just like I said earlier, honestly, we are still learning more about it every year. Okay, so I always think it's really good to know what it is that you're talking about. And I think we think of ADHD kind of behavioural, when actually there is a physiological reason as to why you've got ADHD. The behaviours might be the result, but actually it's caused that there is a physiological reason for it. I have dumbed down the slides, not for you, but for us, because we are not psychologists or that. So basically up in the top there, we've got a brain that is all speaking, all dancing, everybody's communicating with each other, okay? And when your brain is sending good, strong messages, it allows you to be patient, it allows you to be organised, attentive and coordinated. Down below, that's an attention deficit brain. That's actually woolly sheep, and they're all just kind of milling around there, and that means that they're a bit distracted, a bit confused, daydreaming, or indeed hyperactive. The thing that makes the brain speak to other parts of the brain are these things called neurotransmitters. Okay, so I've got a little crib sheet, and I'm sorry it's a bit brainy to start with, but I do think it's really, really important that we understand just exactly where it kind of comes from, and we'll talk about the traits after. So neurotransmitters, they are chemical messengers, okay? They carry messages from one part of the brain to another along pathways of brain cells, and they're called neurons, and across the gaps that there are between the neurons, and the word for that, the name for that is a synapse, okay? So those with ADHD have been found to have lower levels of certain neurotransmitters which affect their ability to send and receive signals between different parts of the brain. So they can affect many different brain functions, including concentration. So pretty big. Okay, so there's a little diagram of it, as I say, lovely and dumbed down. So there's your nerve cells, there's your neurons, there's your gap, your synapse, there's your neurotransmitters. So neurotypical brain, lots and lots of lovely neurotransmitters going between all the different parts of your brain, loud and clear messages, allows you to be all those things. The ADHD brain, you can see there's not so many, so the messages aren't coming through loud and clear. So that's one part of it. The other part as well is the fact that you are genetically made up. We know that in families there's a genetic predisposition to having ADHD, and the genetic components, they're starting to kind of identify what they are. They're not just like one, they're just like tiny little branches of them, okay? So you have got your genetic makeup there, and you have got the propensity then to be forgetful, to be unable to concentrate and everything. So yes, absolutely, you are who you are, but equally your environment is a huge factor too. So if you're in a good, comfortable, sort of supportive environment, then what is created is your phenotype, and the phenotype is basically you because of what you're made up of and the environment that you find yourself in. Okay, so it's the result of both the genetic and the environmental factors. Why is ADHD so invisible in women? Okay, and as I say, I'm the support group side of things. I've always got that hat on. How can I make things better? And you know, Nikki and Demi have got their own stories that we'll tell you about later. But I'd like to start about the information that we do within our training sessions, and we actually develop these ourselves. They're very unimaginatively called My ADHD and Me. But we take you on a journey just exactly about how ADHD kind of affects you. So why specify females? Well, females with ADHD are under-researched, severely underdiagnosed, and most remain unsupported. Female ADHD brains develop and operate differently from male ADHD brains, and presentations, how you present and the co-occurring conditions are different and often more kind of severe for females. There's a huge imbalance in diagnosis and all the rest of it. So the overwhelming majority of neurodevelopmental disorders show a male predominance, okay? So the ratio for males to females with ADHD is 3 to 1. The ratio of males to females who present actually in a clinical setting and recognised with ADHD are 6 to 1. Okay, so 6 males to 1 female. Females are very often misdiagnosed. Those with inattentive symptoms are often misdiagnosed with mood disorders. Those with the combined symptoms are often misdiagnosed with bipolar. Or furthermore, females are often diagnosed with associated conditions such as eating disorders or even trauma, whilst their ADHD is missed. And that happens all too often. Another one is borderline personality disorder. A lot of wrong diagnosis around that. So the female brain, so it's thought to develop, and it's not finished fully developing until your mid-20s, okay? And the development is subtly different for males and females. So the development of different areas of the brain occur at slightly different stages. So there is also the difference in the presence of hormones, in particular the thyroid functioning and the sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. So they also affect how ADHD brain functions. And I have to say, we're really at the beginning of that. So one of our meetings that we had somebody talking about hormones and that, and they're starting to put two and two together. But as I said earlier on, we're kind of learning more about it every day. Okay, there are huge social differences as well. So girls' inattentive symptoms are more likely to be seen as being kind of socially isolated. So particularly at younger ages, males and females tend to socialize in different ways. Some believe that this can have a big impact on ADHD in females, and they exhibit a sort of greater level of peer rejection, aggression, social impairment, and social disability, for want of a better word, than their peers. The kind of differences in that coming between the genders. So the typical female ADHD presentation, they're usually more inattentive rather than the boys. So anxiety disorders are also common amongst those with the inattentive female presentation, and they tend to display fewer symptoms like characteristics of like ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, and depression. Although the comorbidities for females and males with ADHD are fairly similar, so same kind of learning issues and things that come along with it. And females with ADHD are at higher risk of antisocial, addictive, anxiety, mood eating, and substance use disorders. So it is a serious thing, and it all sounds slightly depressing, but I think it's all the more reason why it should be taken seriously and women listen to when they go to their doctor, So basically, in toddlerhood, the gender differences for those with ADHD are non-existent. So age 3 to 4, boys with ADHD are likely to start sort of displaying more non-compliance. They're a wee bit more impulsive and hyperactive than girls. And they are beginning to show signs of being inattentive and internalizing symptoms as well. So these inattentive and or internalizing symptoms begin to escalate markedly during female adolescence. And I have to say, I really find that our organisation, we do an awful lot of advocacy in that for families, and mostly I have to say in schools. So why do girls with ADHD, why do they internalise? So basically there's kind of two competing theories on that. So the underlying biological differences, so females attain developmental competence in emotional, cognitive and social functioning earlier than boys, and the gender-based socialization patterns. So females socialize towards internalizing rather than externalizing. So there is some evidence that in early adulthood, females with ADHD can begin to display externalizing symptoms, and that sometimes can be crime or mood conduct, get a wee bit more oppositional, and very often anxious as well. In education settings, so the females display more inattentive symptoms with less challenging behaviour. So therefore, they are less likely to display school problems. Okay, they go underneath the radar. They're really good at masking. Okay, so you can kind of ignore that. You can ignore somebody not reaching their potential, but if you've got somebody in the class that has got gross motor activity going on, they're very fidgety and very negative, and speak a lot and things go off task, then they come to the fore and they usually are noticed and picked up. So the level of impairment, so relative to peers without ADHD, was as high or even higher with females with ADHD than males. Okay, so females with ADHD can have more school-related problems. So that's special education placement, grade retention, speech and language difficulties, that whole processing thing, and lower academic and cognitive performance than their non-ADHD female peers. So we know that there's a difference, but it's getting the fact that it's ADHD that's the issue, and that's where it gets difficult. So some have found the association between low academic attainment and ADHD to be actually stronger in females than males. So once again, all the more reason to get smarter and better at identifying it. And we know that teachers are much better at identifying males than females with the condition. So, and even sometimes when they have identical symptoms. So that's the whole kind of gender thing going on there. employment as well. There's very little research or gender-based research in ADHD and employment. So what there is, the tiny bit that there is, indicates that employment outcomes are even poorer for females than males with ADHD, possibly because of the kind of work that they do, you know, very, very kind of hands-on and things. So there's a lot more boys that work more, you know, kind of rurally or in the construction industry, where that's kind of fitting in with what it is that they need for employment. Neurodivergent women often slip through the cracks of ADHD diagnosis because they can appear smart and gifted. And there's some really, really great articles. So there's one there in the Guardian, and it's that's the link to it there. I don't know, Pauline could possibly share it in a better format. So I guess for me, what can happen is that the women with ADHD can kind of be split into two categories. So you've got those that seek and manage to get their ADHD diagnosis, and the trajectory for them is they can seek support. Just, you know, hopefully that's what Demi was talking about earlier. I missed it. You know, they learn to understand themselves and their condition. And after 20 years, I know that that part of it is actually key. That's what's missing, is that they're so busy having to do or mask or pretend that they don't really get to kind of know themselves, you know. Very often a word that a lot of them use to me as well is validated. So they really, really feel, right, that's why, you know. So there's a huge area of that. And they can stop blaming themselves then for all of the failures as they perceive things that had happened. But along came this, and right at the beginning when I started, I hadn't factored this in, and that was that there is a grieving process to go through too, you know. It's just like, oh, what if, what could have been different, you know. But then what happens when you get your diagnosis, then you can find your people, you know. So that is just about the best thing of all.
Hi, I'm Demi, and I am 29 years old. I'll be 30 in March, and yeah, I have ADHD. Before this meeting tonight, actually, I was very ADHD. We'd agreed to meet like 15 minutes early, and I was still whizzing around, like brushing my teeth, like getting changed, like doing my hair, just zooming around, and like I'm still on the call, but I've not got my screen on, and I'm just like listening. So I'm like multitasking like several things at once. That's so like classic story of me. It's just like, yeah, like even if I know I've got a big thing, I'll still be late. So yeah, and I'm also not very prepared. So I'm just like
Don't worry.
um yeah, so yeah, like because things like this are so formal and so content as well, but that's just so not my life. So yeah, basically my story is that I was diagnosed in 2019, and before that, there's been a lot of struggle, just growing up, and then that struggle has led to frustration, which has led to misunderstandings, and then that's kind of all kind of went really inward, and then I've had a lot of like mental health issues with low self-esteem, or like I had an eating disorder when I was in high school, and anxiety, and in and out of the doctors and the mental health kind of facilities with that, like growing up. And yeah, like I said, like this struggle has really impacted like all of my relationships, really, my relationships with my siblings, with teachers, with like partners growing up, and then family as well. And so I had a late diagnosis, although I'm still young. And I'm really grateful that I found out at the age I did. Although a big part of my story and my kind of journey was, and it's still ongoing, is like still trying to accept that, you know, I wasn't diagnosed earlier, and trying to accept how and not regret how life could have been so different. I could have had a much easier time, specifically in education. So like university was really difficult, and I kind of look back on those 4 years thinking just how much support I could have had, kind of anger and frustration that I went through so many, like I had so many different teachers in my life and no one noticed, no one kind of identified those traits. And it's hard to not get frustrated about that and to not want to blame people. But I think if there is a reason for that, it's that just this whole issue of invisibility of women with ADHD. And I certainly never knew when I was in education. I didn't even I really didn't think that women could have ADHD. If someone asked me what I thought ADHD was, I would have said it's what young boys have at school.
Mhm.
And they grow out of it eventually. And I probably had some judgment about that too. Like it was like, yeah, it's, you know, young boys at school who have a difficult time at home because of the dynamic that goes on at home. Maybe they're from a rough background, or maybe they have like there's some kind of abuse going on behind the scenes, so that's why they're a bit disruptive in class. That was what my kind of judgment would have been on that. Like, and that's only probably like 5 years ago. I would have thought that. But yeah, my diagnosis came about because I was learning to drive. So I'd finished university, and then I was no longer living in a city, and I was having to commute for work. I studied photography and film at university, and then I started working freelance in film and TV. So a car was necessary, and I spent ages learning to drive, and I just thought it's still to this day, I think it's one of the hardest things I've done is
Mhm.
passing my test. And it kind of all came out there for me. The distractibility, the impulsivity, just like not taking things in, daydreaming. Like I'd be daydreaming when my driving instructor was in the car next to me, and they'd say to me like, "Okay, we're gonna go down here. You're gonna take a left at the next roundabout," and I just would get to the roundabout and just do my own thing because I just couldn't remember what they said, and yeah, or I would need things explained to me in a very specific way when they were showing me kind of like a roundabout system, and I would say, "Can you draw it for me? Can you just draw? Can you draw what you mean?" Like, and just this urge for like this need for simplicity. Um, so I think these questions and this frustration of why can't I pass my test? I used to come home from driving lessons, I'd be crying. I'd feel like it was my fault. I felt like there was something wrong with me. And that was a theme just my whole life growing up, thinking there's something wrong with me, I'm broken, damaged in some way. And so I think just Googling these questions or seeing a list of symptoms displayed on, I think for me it was Pinterest or something, and reading that profile and thinking, that's me, you know, and like, and then that curiosity didn't go away. And then I think I went to this is another part of my story, and something I would really urge if you're identifying with any of this is that there's a fight and a desperation for a diagnosis, and kind of like really need to be persistent. And so that's what I was. I'm glad I was, and I think because I knew, right, I need to drive in order to get work, and the thing that's standing in the way is this ADHD potentially. So yeah, I just kept going back to my GP, and I really just stressed them, like, you know, I'm gonna have an accident, I think, because I've had so many near misses in the car. It's crazy. And so that eventually led to a diagnosis. But like I said, I had to I phoned like every week or something. And yeah, and then there's like the relief of getting the diagnosis, and like I say, the frustration of it not being caught earlier. But then there's also this other third part of that, which is I thought I was just going to be able to take some meds and everything was going to be fine. And that wasn't the case. And since then, I realised there's had to be so much work put into just understanding what ADHD is. And I've done that with Lorna and Nikki in our support group. We've went through that program that Lorna described. And that is a whole part of the parcel of it. Part of the diagnosis is then, okay, now the work begins, of like figuring out how my ADHD displays, because I think everyone's unique, and how their ADHD like expresses itself, and then and then just learning as much as you can about it, so then you can like advocate for yourself, and then you can find out what you need, and then you can try all these different tools, and there's so much trial and error involved. So I'm still going through that process, because like I said, I was only diagnosed in 2019, and then COVID happened, and a lot of things were slowed down. So I've only joined this support group in the last year and a half, I think. And yeah, I'm still learning loads, and and my definition of ADHD is just that I and we think differently, and that's how I would define it. So yeah,
That's
that's
really interesting.
my intro. Thank you.
Great. It's great.
Thanks, Demi.
I'm Nikki. I'm 51 years old. I've got 2 children, and my youngest got diagnosed with ADHD when he was 4 years old at nursery. So fortunately for me, the nursery leader had been on a course doing about ADHD and recognised all the symptoms in him. But I'd known for years, he was only 4, but I'd still known for years that he wasn't presenting in the way that my eldest did. Little did I know at the time that my eldest was autistic, and therefore he didn't present in the way a neurotypical child would either, but I didn't know that because he was my only son at the time. So basically looking at my children's behaviour caused me to go, that's a lot like me. And I've known Lorna for 20 years, and so she was sort of giving me hints as well, the way she does, like nice little subtle hints. And yeah, just recognizing the symptoms in my kids made me realize, but it wasn't until my mom died of breast cancer, and she was in the WI actually in Wales, so I'm a big fan of this group. But yeah, she died of breast cancer, and I literally fell apart. I had a massive breakdown, and I was just like, I did not realize how much I relied on my mom to do absolutely everything for me. And it was at that point I went, my whole life's been a complete car crash. Why? And it wasn't really until that happened that because she was the one that I just called all the time and like spoke to if I needed anything doing or if I needed emotional support, which was daily. So yeah, I hadn't realized the extent of what was wrong with me until my mom died. And looking after my kids as well, I've learned a lot, and doing all the courses with Lorna and mentoring at the ADHD group and speaking to other parents, I've learned a lot. So yeah, like I said, it really impacted my life in a hugely negative way. Like echoing what Demi said, it was basically, relationships, not being able to concentrate, dropping out of school, dropping out of every job I've ever had. Just everything was wrong and I'm really actually quite clever, not to blow my own trumpet, but, I'm at university now, I'm doing a degree, and that's because I got a diagnosis, and albeit late, I was like 45 when I got my autism diagnosis and 47 when I got my ADHD diagnosis. Since been diagnosed with a fair amount of comorbidities like dyslexia and sensory processing disorder and audio processing disorder and all sorts of things. So, and I've got anxiety disorder, but most of my life I was misdiagnosed with things like anxiety disorder, and I've got post-traumatic stress syndrome from a car accident, but that was exacerbated by the fact that I had ADHD and autism. And again, like Demi, didn't get recognised by anybody at school. They just kept saying that I was either really naughty or really quiet or daydreamy or all the words that you use. So you do, as soon as you get diagnosed, it's a sense of kind of validation and relief. But at the same time, you're kind of angry that like my whole life how different could it have been if I'd have been able to have the support in place so that I could have gone to uni when I was young? You know, what could I have achieved? So you do go through this whole process of, wow, that's a bit brutal. But when you get over that, and you do get over that, you then start like educating yourself, like Demi's doing at the moment, like I've been doing for the last, goodness knows what slogan now, 17 years. And you find ways of, you can't make it go away, but you can find ways of living with it and coping with it and managing it. And that's what I do. And a lot of the time I don't do that very well because I still have days where I have huge meltdowns. But I am like really heavily supported at uni. So I've got like a mental health mentor there, and I've got a learning support there, and I couldn't be there without them. And I think that's why diagnosis is so important for me, because I literally couldn't function without Lorna and Anne at the group, and the other Lorna at the group, just helping me on a daily basis, sometimes with form filling and all the things that I find difficult because of my sort of executive functioning not working properly in my brain. I get other people to help me, but it's hard asking for help when you're first diagnosed as well. It's really difficult for me in particular. I found it really difficult to ask for help. So, but then I've had to advocate for my boys, and in doing that, I realised that I also needed to advocate for myself because nobody else is going to do it for me. So yeah, that's what I've been doing, and that's me pretty much.
Hi everyone. Thanks very much for joining us, and I hope it's been informative to everyone. I know it has. I can see all the comments coming in. I was going to pass over to Lorna and ask her to potentially just list some of the kind of the benefits or the, you know, of having an ADHD brain, and it's not all kind of doom and gloom, if you wouldn't mind, Lorna.
No, not at all. And I would absolutely agree with that. I can honestly say that my working career, 20 odd years working within the ADHD community, has just been fantastic. They are the most incredible bunch of people. They're funny, they're witty, they're loyal, they look at life differently. And whilst I'd just like to say to the lady that sadly about her son there in prison, and just 5% of the population, so in the adult male prison population, 25% would meet an ADHD diagnosis, 42% in young offenders. So sadly, your son is not alone, and just shows that, you know, we need to do this. But they're overrepresented there, but they are overrepresented in entrepreneurs, in the arts, in the sciences, in adventurers, and like to say that stand-up comedians as well. So, you know, it takes something else to stand there with a microphone and a sea of people in front of you and just absolutely go off all over the place. So that's when your ADHD and your mind wandering and that is really, really helpful. So, but the secret is find out about yourself, understand yourself, and then begin to forgive yourself. Never mind the things that you can't do. Focus on all the fabulous things that you can do.
Thanks,
Great.
Lorna.
Can I ask everyone to just unmute, and then we'll give Lorna and Demi and Nikki a round of applause, and give yourself a round of applause too. Wonderfully open and honest. Thank you.